There's no shortage of men, I mean, who are absolutely terrified of women. I mean, I've had many of them in my practice, you know. I had one guy, he was so terrified of women he couldn't even talk to them on the phone. It's more common than you think. They're low status men. You know, they're people that are generally regarded as losers, and there isn't anybody who really gives a damn about what happens to them one way or another, and there's a lot more men in that category than there are women. Women select men. That makes them nature, because nature is what selects. And so, you know, you can think, well, it's only symbolic that women are nature. It's like, no, it's not just symbolic. It's not just symbolic. You know, and the woman, in some sense, is the gatekeeper to not in some sense, is the gatekeeper to reproductive success. And you can't get more like nature than that. In fact, it's the very definition of nature.
What do you expect from women? If you got pregnant because you had sex, you'd be pretty damn choosy too. So, you know, clue in a bit. And then, well, don't they find you attractive? Well, maybe you're not. Like, have you paid attention to how you dress? Do you have a plan? Are you as educated as you could be? You know, are you a liar? Are you a rabid pornography user? Because maybe that's undermining your motivation to seek out a woman and grow yourself up. It's like, if you're rejected constantly and you're out there really trying, you know, because that's another thing to ask yourself is, well, how many women have you actually asked out? And are you so sure that you're not picking women who will certainly reject you because you're trying to bat out of your league?
If you look at which male in a chimp troop fathers most of the offspring, it's the dominant male. But the reason for that isn't because the female chimps sort of flock around the dominant male. Now that happens in other species, but it doesn't happen with chimps. What happens is the dominant male chases all the subordinate males away and will interfere with any sexual behavior they manifest. It'll chase them away. The females, though, are perfectly happy to mate with a subordinate male if they're in heat and they get the opportunity. So they go into heat, which is something that doesn't happen with female humans, and they really don't care who they mate with. Okay. Female humans are much different than that. They're picky.
The socioeconomic status of a woman is determines almost zero of her attractiveness towards a man, whereas the socioeconomic status of a man is a major determinant of his attractiveness towards a woman. And it isn't his wealth either, because that's been tested. It's his capacity to generate and be productive and to share, because that beats the hell out of wealth. Wealth can disappear, right? But the capacity to be productive and share, that's a much more important element. And why not be chosen on the basis of that, especially because women have to have infants, and infants make the woman dependent, and the woman is just looking logically, rationally, and from an evolutionary perspective for someone who's useful enough to lend a hand.
Women also seem to evaluate men for their fitness. Now, so lots of men have no sexual partners and they have no children. That's not the case with women. Almost all women have one child or more, and it's a rare woman indeed who cannot find a sexual partner.
Women are more picky in their mate choices than men, especially sexually. That's the case in every culture. And it's not surprising, because women have more at stake sexually than men do, you know, per episode, because men don't get pregnant, obviously. And so that female pickiness that's the case. That's definitely true. Whether it's worse now or not, I doubt if it is. I would say to young men who are irritated at women is, if you're irritated at women, you know, as a class of creature, there's something wrong with you, because they're right. You're wrong. They're right to not pick you. If they're not picking you, it's because they're right. What role do women play in relationship to men? Well, first, they make them self-conscious. Let's not ever forget about that. Because I would say the primary role that women have in relationship to men is to make them self-conscious. And men don't precisely like that. There's nothing that will make a man more self-conscious than being rejected. And why? Because why is he rejected? Well, obviously, Mother Nature, in the guise of that particular woman, has said, you're not so bad for a friend, but there's no reason that your genetic material should propagate itself into the future. And so what the females seem to be doing is using some marker or some set of markers as a proxy indicator for health. And I think you could say reasonably that female
human beings do the same thing to male human beings. And there's some of that vice versa too. Like we evaluate each other, for example, for symmetry, which is one of the elements of beauty, because healthier people tend to be more symmetrical, and lots of animals use symmetry. So symmetry is a marker, and there's other markers like shoulder width to waist width is one, and waist width to hip width is another. That's usually what males use that to evaluate females in part. So there's lots of markers of health. But it also looks to me like the data worldwide seems to indicate that women, so imagine that women mate across dominance hierarchies and up, socioeconomically speaking. And on average, across cultures, women go for men who are about 4 to 5 years older. You know, it varies. In the Scandinavian countries, that's shrunk a little bit, but not that much. And in other cultures, it's bigger. I would say that depends to some degree on difficulty of establishing economic independence, right? Because in richer countries, it's easier to have enough economic independence if you're a male to be a useful participant in the process of having children. But it doesn't matter, cross-culturally, it's still across and up, where men mate across and down. They don't care much about socioeconomic status. It doesn't seem to be part of their selection method, generally speaking. So I think that part of that is also the ability of women to select for male health. It's something like that, because it isn't only that, because if you're healthy and energetic, you're much more likely to be successful, because it's very hard to be successful if you're ill, obviously. I mean, so, because the competition's just too high. And both genders, both sexes select each other for attractiveness, both select for intelligence, both select for personality, although there are differences there in terms of what's stressed. Get over your fear of rejection. And how do you do that? By encountering it continually and continually and continually, so that you're no longer paralyzed by this.
Be a little stronger, dress a little better, speak a little more clearly, aim a little higher, and practice that, and that'll work. Now, I know that that's more difficult for some people than others, because some people bear incredibly difficult developmental burdens, and I'm not saying that this is easy, but I'm saying that it's a useful reaction.
Women make intense demands on men, and it's no wonder. But the thing is that because women engaged in hypergamy, at least in part, the selection pressure that women placed on men developed the entire species. Now there's two things that happened as far as I could tell. The men competed for competence, let's say. So the male hierarchy is a mechanism that pushes the best men to the top, virtually by definition, and then that's the effect of that is multiplied by the fact that women who are hypergamous peel from the top, and so that the males who are the most competent are much more likely to leave offspring, and that seemed to be what drove our cortical expansion, for example, which happened very, very rapidly over the course of evolutionary time.